Welcome to the CSR Journal. Today we have Ms. Kerry Kennedy with us. Thank you so much for talking to us, ma'am. Ma'am, you are on the board of Global Youth Action Network. What do you think, or how much do you think, can youth make a difference in all the social change that we've been dreaming about?
I think that our world has to rely on youth. Youth is our future. And it's young people who traditionally make the difference
Right.
in the world. It was a young Christopher Columbus who sailed in 1492. It was a young Thomas Jefferson who wrote the United States Declaration of
Right.
Independence. It was a young man who is Jesus Christ who brought Christianity to the world. The youth, if you look at revolutions around the world, disruptions of political systems, it's almost always run by youth. So that's who we look to for the future.
Right. Ma'am, being associated with a family that has a history of, social work and being in power, what is the difference, or what is the major inspiration that comes to you when you're working for social upliftment?
The work that I do in human rights, I started in the early 1980s. At that time, all of Latin America was under right-wing military dictatorships. There's not one left standing. All of Eastern Europe was under communism. Communism there's no leadership of communist countries there anymore. South Africa was at the height of apartheid. Today, South Africa's had a series of freely elected governments, elected by a majority of their people. So I think that I feel very optimistic. I've seen these great changes happen, and they happen not because governments or big corporations or huge militaries want them to. All those three groups tried to stop them, but because small groups of determined people harness the dream of freedom and make it come true. And that's what gives me excitement, because I think that I'm very optimistic about the future. I think that we've seen these great changes. Child labor has been cut by a third over the last 10 years. So I think there's a long way to go. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to do it with determination, but we can get the job done.
Right. As you correctly mentioned about governments and all stopping them. So do you think, there is a lack of will in the governments or maybe whoever is in power, right, from corporations, in making the real change, maybe in the run for administration or in the run for power? There's a lack of will to do the serious good work at the ground?
Well, I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody, because power does not cede power. Power has to be taken,
Right.
and has to be demanded. And what we're talking about here is disrupting the status quo. We're talking about challenging the power structures. And they're never going to say, oh yes, let me give it to you. They're going to keep it.
Right.
And they're going to fight to keep it. So that's why it's so important to teach the next generation, not only give them education, but specifically educate them on how to do community organizing, on what their rights are and how to assert those rights.
Right. So it's not only education which will really make the difference.
No, it has to be human rights education in particular.
Right. Ma'am, you've been working for equal justice and rights across borders. Talking about India, is there any instance that you have in mind while working here that you would like to narrate?
Well, I think that Kailash Satyarthi is a great example of somebody who has been working on an issue. When he started in the early 1980s, child labor was not on the international agenda.
Right.
And now, thanks to his struggle, 178 countries, all the nations in the world have come together and said we are going to stop child labor and child slavery, and that's part of the Sustainable Development
Right.
Goals. So I think it really shows the power of one, the capacity of one person to make a difference.
Right. How do you think can we involve children in framing policies, in ensuring that they have a say in whatever is being decided for them?
Well, I think number one, part of the reason that children are repressed is because they have very few mechanisms to assert their power and assert their rights.
Right.
So, again, I don't think it's going to happen because people give it to them. I think they're going to have to organize themselves and demand it. And I think one of the great things that Kailash Satyarthi has done is he has taught students, taught young people how to assert their rights, how to feel comfortable doing so.
What do you think, or what role do you think can corporates play here, ensuring that rights of children are intact?
Well, I think, the human rights are supposed to be protected by governments. And sometimes where governments fail to do the job that they're supposed to do, corporations have a role to play in protecting those rights. And especially along supply chains where we often see children involved or exploitation of women and men. 60% of child labor is in the agriculture fields.
Right.
So we see a lot of that. So there's a role of corporations to ensure that things that they produce are not being manufactured by children, that there are mechanisms in place to protect children and to protect all their workers.
How do you look at CSR as, or corporate social responsibility as?
Well, that is something, almost every corporation now says that they have a corporate social responsibility program. I'm not really interested in the fact that they have it on the books. What I want to see are what are the outcomes. Are there children working for you? Are there women working for you? Do you have ventilation systems? Do you have a mechanism for complaints? Do people get fired if they object to how they're being treated by their boss? Are there decent working conditions? Are people being paid? Is that pay fair? Those are the questions to ask, not we have a policy.
Ma'am, it was indeed very insightful talking to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you.
Thank you.